Hello everyone. So in today's session, we are going to cover another interview question, which is asking JavaScript interview rounds and front-end engineering rounds, which is to make a polyfill for map, reduce, and filter method. So with that in mind, let's start off with the session for the day. Before we continue with the actual coding part, we need to first understand what a polyfill is. Polyfill is basically a piece of code which is used to implement modern functionality on older browsers like Internet Explorer or other browsers do not natively support modern functionalities, and sometimes we need to write polyfills to implement modern functionality using older code. So in this case, what we need to do is we need to come up with a custom code which is able to implement or simulate the map, reduce, and filter methods, which are built-in methods in array, and we need to create our own implementation of these three methods during the interview round. And for that, we are going to use a property in array which is called as prototype. So prototype is basically a keyword which is used to add new properties to array, and it allows us to add new properties and new methods to arrays. So with that in mind, let's start off with the coding part. So let's just say we have an array called const, array of elements. With some numeric values like any random values. And let's just say we are supposed to implement polyfill for map method. In this case, the first thing that we can do is we can first try to understand how the map intuitively works for an array of numbers. So for that, let's create const new array or mapped array is equal to array of elements dot map. So map function takes a function as its parameter, and in this parameter we can manipulate the elements of the array. So we can go with item star 2. Let's just say we are trying to duplicate or multiply each element of the array with 2, and we are going to console.log original array which is array of elements and the mapped array. So let's just say what the console is. So as you can see, this is the original array which contains 2, 4, 6, 7, 10. And in the map array, we have the values 4, 8, 12, 14, and 20, which are the double values of the original array. Now we need to implement a polyfill, and polyfill is basically the custom implementation of the map method. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to access the array object. Then we are going to write the keyword which is called as prototype. This will allow us to use our own implementation or extend the implementation of array and add our own property. And let's just say we go with my map, which is our custom implementation, and we have a function. So in this function, the one thing which we are getting as a parameter is the callback function. So we can write here callback, and let's just console.log this keyword. So this keyword is basically pointing to the inner context of the array, and we are going to see what this keyword consists of. So let's just go with another const, which is my mapped array. And here we are going to use the array of elements again. Dot my map item, and also we are also going to return item star 2 here. Now if you observe in the console, you can see that this keyword consists of the elements of the array. So this keyword is basically pointing to the array itself, and we can use this keyword to implement our own implementation of map method. So what we are going to do is we are going to loop over this array of elements. We don't have access to the elements of the array by any other method. So what we are going to do is we are going to loop over this keyword. So we can write for where, because let and const are modern keywords, and for polyfills we generally use the older keywords like where and other stuff. So we go with where I is equal to 0, I is less than this dot length, and I plus plus. So we have a for loop, and we are going to iterate over each element of the array. Now what map method does is it returns a new array, right? So we are going to write var new array is equal to array. Then we need to push some value in the array so that the new value is outputted by the new array. So we go with new array dot push. And here we call the callback function. Why? Because the callback function consists of the elements of the array, and the callback function, the callback function is applied on the elements of the array and we get the new array. So we are going to go with new array dot push callback and this of high value. Then we will return the new array. And let's just see if this works. So we are going to go with console.log my mapped array, comma, and I think we can remove the this keyword, console.log. So this is our original array, this is the mapped array, and this is our my mapped array. And as you can see, the output of mapped array and my mapped array is same, which means that the polyfill for map function is complete. So what we did here we first initialized a new array, then we run a for loop on this keyword which points to all the elements of the array. Then we push the new values into the array, which is to call the callback function itself and pass the value of this keyword with the element of the array into callback and call the function on each element of the array. So this callback function or the function which is passed to map function is passed to each element of the array and we get the new uh, array which is the mapped value. Also there is another value which is present in map function which is called as index, and this index points to the current index of the elements. So what we can do is instead of passing just the callback function, we can also pass the index as well if we want. But for now, let's just keep things simple and we are not going to touch the index value. Now the next thing that we can do is we can go and implement the polyfill for the filter method. So the next method that we are going to see is filter method. So let's start off with that. So we are going to take the same array of elements and apply a filter method and see how it works. So we go with const filtered array is equal to array of elements dot filter item and return. So filter method basically filters the elements. So what we are going to do is we are going to filter the even elements from the array. So we go with item mod 2 is equal to 0. So let's console.log filtered array comma filtered array. So in this case, filtered array returns 2, 4, 6, 10. And from the original value, the 7 value is excluded because it is not an even value. So with this in mind, let's just go ahead and filter the values. So we are going with const or array dot prototype dot my filter is equal to function. Here also we are getting a callback function. So callback in the function, we are going to again go with an array. So we are going to with new array is equal to empty array. Now we are trying to check the condition, right? This callback function is trying to check the condition, and we need to iterate over the array for this as well. So we go with for var I is equal to 0, I is less than this dot length I plus plus, and here we are going to add a condition which is if callback of this of I, that is if the condition of in the callback function is met, then we are going to go with new array dot push and this of I. Then here also we are going to return the new array. Let's just say if this works with another variable which is my filtered array is equal to array of elements dot my filter item, and we are going to add the same condition, which is return item mod 2 is equal to 0. Then console dot log my filtered array. Now let's just see in the console. So as you can see, the filtered array output and my filtered array output is the same, which is 2, 4, 6, 10, which means that the filter function is working. And what did we do in the filter function? We first initialize an empty array, then we ran a for loop on this keyword, which points to all the elements of the array. Here we checked if the callback function on this of I works, and if the callback function condition is met, then we push the value into the new array and we return the filtered array like that. Now the next function that we are going to see is the reduce method. So in case of reduce method, the syntax is like this. So we can go with reduced array is equal to array of elements dot reduce function. And in this case, reduce method consists of two parameters instead of one in the callback function, which is total and the current numeric value. And we can go with something like total plus new. Basically, we are getting the sum of elements. And let's just console.log the reduced array value. So what reduce does is it iterates over the entire elements of the array and it goes on adding each element to the total. And the total that we receive is 29. We can also pass another variable here, which is the initial value. And if we set it to 10, then 10 is taken as the initial value and the reduced array takes that value as the initial value and adds each element to the value 10 and then returns the entire sum. So in this case, the sum returned is 39 instead of 29. So reduce method basically takes two values, which is the callback and the initial value. So with that in mind, let's start off with the custom implementation. So we again go with array.prototype dot my reduce is equal to function, and in this case we have callback and the initial value. So first we are going to create an accumulator variable which contains all the sum or whatever the callback value is. So this could be sum, this could be product of the elements or anything. Reduce method basically iterates over all the elements and returns a single value based on what the operation we are doing here. We will see that in some time. So we will assign the initial value to accumulator because that value is taken by the accumulator and then we iterate over the entire reduce method. So we go with for where I is equal to 0, I is less than this dot length, I plus plus. So in this case, if we have the accumulator, that is if accumulator is defined or accumulator is not equal to undefined, then what we do is we take the accumulator and we apply the callback function on the accumulator with the accumulator itself, which is the in total or the sum, and the this of I element or the current element of the array. And if the accumulator is not defined, that is if the initial value is not passed, then what we will do is we will set the initial value as this of 0. So when this for loop is running, if the initial value is not passed, then what we will do is we will set the accumulator to accumulator is equal to this of I. Basically, when I is 0, then accumulator would not be defined in this if the initial value is undefined. That is, in this case, if the initial value is not passed, then the value here will be undefined. So in this case, the if condition will run, it will go into the else, and accumulator will be set to the first element of the array. And if not, that is if the initial value is passed, then the accumulator will be set to the initial value, and then all the elements would be added to the accumulator value. That is, the total would get printed in the console. So with that in mind, let's try to see if this works. So we go with console.log reduced my reduced array comma array of elements dot my reduce. Then we go with, or what we can do is const my reduced array is equal to array of elements dot my reduce total comma new, and we return total plus new, and we print here my reduced array. And let's just see if the values okay. So we haven't returned the accumulator, which is why the output is undefined. So we are going to return accumulator. Let's save. And as you can see, the reduced array value is 29 and the my reduced array value is also 29. If we pass any initial value here, like let's just say 10, and here as well, then this will get assigned to the accumulator value. And as you can see, the value changes from 29 to 39 in both cases. So let's just see how this worked. So initially, the accumulator value is set to initial value if the initial value is defined. If it is not, then accumulator takes the value of this of I, which is the first element of the array. After that, accumulator value is obviously defined because we either assign the 0th element of the array or the initial value to the accumulator. Then we apply the callback function or the function which is present in the reduced value to the accumulator with the current element of the array, and we pass that value to accumulator back. And then the accumulator value returns the end result. So if we go with total star new instead of sum, then the product of all values will be printed along with initial value as 10. So as you can see, we have 33600 and we have 33600 here as well. So that is basically how the reduce method works. So if you want the product of all values, we can remove the initial value and this will print out the product of all values, which is 3360 in both cases. So this is how we implement the polyfills for map, reduce, and filter methods in JavaScript. Hope you understood the concepts, and that's it from my end for today. Thank you and have a nice day. Goodbye.